Today's date is 7 October 2022. My name is Dennis Gill with the Americans in Wartime Experience. We're here at the Women's Memorial Museum in Arlington, Virginia. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Alex Horton. Thank you. Appreciate you sitting down with us.
Yeah.
If you could just give us a little bit of background about yourself. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Born in Los Angeles, California. Parents moved us to the Midwest when I was pretty young. Grew up in Michigan mostly, and joined the military through an ROTC program in Michigan. Went to Western Michigan University, and that's how I joined.
Any other family members that are military?
Yeah, so many. I think the normal response of grandparents served. My father served in the Navy for a few years. And then my brother is in the Navy. He's a pilot, currently still serving. My sister married a Marine, so he did 20 years and he just got out a couple years ago. And I think that's like the close family that.
Why did you decide to join? Why did you pick you were Army, correct?
I was Army.
Why
yes.
did you pick Army?
I think Army picked me. I was a 9/11 kid. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase, but I was, I believe, in middle school or high school when 9/11 happened. My dad was a very patriotic individual and wanted to make it a point to let us know the significance of that. Which can be a blessing and a curse now that you're older in life. But when we were, I don't know what age I was, but when 9/11 happened, 3 months afterwards, he insisted on flying us to New York City to see what was just holes in the ground at the time. We waited in the freezing cold, so it had to be like January or February in New York City when they first opened the public viewing for that time. Yeah, and we just that always like stuck in my head for many years, and so that was a piece of the pie, I think. But the biggest reason, and I'm just being honest, is we came from a lower income family, and I wanted to make a life for myself, and I knew that I could with the help and benefits that the military provides. And I said the Army chose me because I think I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. I thought not only were the women just exceptional in the Marine Corps, but their uniforms were the sharpest of all. And you're a young kid making silly decisions based off of silly things. And so the Army provided me a 4-year scholarship to go to college. It was right after the surge happened in Iraq. And at first there was no scholarship available, and then President Bush asked for more troops, and about a week later the colonel called me and said, we have a 4-year scholarship. I mean, that's how quickly that turnover was happening back then. And so I said yes.
What do you recall about September 11th? You said you're middle school, right? So
yeah, I think I was in 8th grade. I think that had to be the year. I mean, I was a kid, so knowledge of external, the gravity of external things like that was so, your brain's not even able to grasp that at that time, I don't think. I do know that what hit me, or what was jarring, and as a young human moving through the world, was the impact it had on all of the adults around me. That day, I think they did this across the United States, but they put everyone on lockdown, as opposed to letting us leave. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I remember my English teacher rolling in one of those TVs on a cart like they used to do, and locked the door, and we just sat there and listened to the news. And I also remember her crying. So I think that was the significance for me, was watching these adults around me having such a visceral response to what was happening, and me not understanding the gravity of what that meant.
How about when you went there? What were your thoughts? Do you remember?
I think I have a similar answer, which was a kid's not able to understand that, you know. I remember being irritated with my father that we had to wait in line in the freezing cold in New York.
Yeah.
And I remember walking up the, what did they call those? The words coming for me is plank, but I know that's not it. The viewings, there were like these paths. They built these like, that hung over the holes, which was really intense.
Yeah.
And I remember crying. And I remember the energy around me of heaviness. But again, I didn't know the why behind why it was so impactful.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember watching my dad tear up and having like this is problematic, but I didn't understand the why. Yeah.
So you joined the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea what you wanted to do in the Army?
Such a loaded question. Yes, I absolutely did. I mean, I was the kid who, and all of these stories are so embarrassing. I mean, I saw my father, I saw my grandfather, he taught him talk about my grandfather. We watched war movies growing up, all of those things, and I didn't understand the gender of life yet. I never really understood the gender of life, you know, and I watched G.I. Jane as a kid, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. That sounds good, you know? And so when I joined the military, or when I was in college, I tried to do all the things that everyone else was doing, which predominantly was men.
Right.
And so we had a program at our university called the Western Ranger Organization, which is so nerdy now that I say that out loud. And I mean, but I memorized the Ranger Creed when I was a freshman in college. They put us through like a selection process in the ROTC program, so we were like the more elite of the ROTC cadets, you know. And I was the only woman who made it through, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. This makes the most sense, you know. I'm good at this. I was good at tactical stuff. I enjoyed being a leader in that capacity. And then I got to my senior year, and all the guys were kind of laughing at me like, you know, you can't choose that, right? That's not a path you can do. And I like couldn't compute. I knew so little about the military that it just didn't make sense to me. And at the time, it was 2009, and that was still the way it was. So to answer your question, like I wanted to be an infantryman, like I thought that, or infantrywoman, I thought that was the path. And so I chose the best I could, which was intel, military intelligence. Yeah.
What's training like for that? Is it?
Well, I mean, I think it's why I led down the path that I did, because it wasn't what I desired, but I knew that it would give me a top secret clearance. I knew there was benefits to choosing that path. I knew it might get me into places that I really wanted to be in my career. But training is down in Arizona, and it's very computer heavy, and without breaking any clearance stuff here, you know, it's a lot of sitting behind a computer and
analyzing data and things like that.
Yeah. And not what I wanted, you know. I wanted to be with soldiers. I wanted to be leading people, engaging with humans, and so that was a hard realization for me my first year in the military, and that's why I joined the cultural support team program. Yeah.
What would it talk about the cultural support team? I mean, that's something you hear a lot about, really. It's almost one of those hidden gems, I guess. You don't really hear too much.
No, people don't know about it at all, actually. Which has been an interesting. I just transitioned in 2020. I got out, and it's been a hard lesson to learn. You know, people put Ranger in front of somebody, they put Navy SEAL in front of something, and everyone snaps to help them out. No one knows what cultural support team program is. So it has been a hard moment of reckoning for me to recognize that. So when I was intel school, as a young second lieutenant, I saw a poster on the wall, as the story goes, in the women's bathroom that said, be a part of history, join the special operations community. And essentially, and I'm sure other women will talk about this as their interviews happen today, but essentially it was a loophole. Women could still not be in combat.
Right.
And so the special operations community was like, well, we're gonna go past that because we need that to happen, and we can't get the government to catch up with us fast enough. So we're just gonna loophole it, which was to create this program. And so I ripped that poster off the wall and I was like, I'm doing this. I cannot sit behind this computer the rest of my career. This is not something I desire. And I'm definitely not one to follow rules very well. So I'm more of the, ask for forgiveness, not for permission kind of person. So I did all the caveats to apply for selection. And I had my leadership at the school sign off on me going to selection, which is very much, if anyone knows anything about it, it's very much against the rules because I hadn't even signed into my unit yet to meet my future boss. So when I showed up to my unit to meet my future boss about 6 months later, I already had orders to go to selection. So she was less than pleased with me as an individual. But I knew what I wanted, and I knew it wasn't intel in that capacity. I really thoroughly enjoy intel work, but I enjoyed it the way that I got to do it. So I think that answers your initial question. But the Cultural Support Team program was essentially created to loophole the combat ban, which in turn allowed them to attach women who were trained, selected, and assessed to either Special Forces teams or the Ranger Regiment or other Tier 1 units, so Navy SEALs, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of the baseline answer to what the program, how it started, and then what it flourished into is a much larger conversation.
When did you deploy? You deployed to Afghanistan, correct?
First time, yes. Yeah.
When did you deploy first time?
So first deployment was almost right away. So I did assessment and selection, did the training 6 months later, and deployed with the Ranger Regiment for 9 months. And that was in January of 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was gone the whole year, basically. Got home in the fall.
Let me rewind real quick. So you talked about selection.
Yeah.
So not everybody that wants to do that gets to do it.
Correct.
Right. It's kind of like being a Navy SEAL. Not everybody can be one.
Correct.
So tell us about what's that process, the selection process. This is before you even go to training, right? This is
just to be part of it. Yes,
okay.
yes. There's a term that you may know, but it's the whole building the plane in the air. I think that's the special operations motto. So selection morphed over time. But the initial selection was I believe just under 2 weeks. It's been years, so it's been some time. Where they just try to burn you into the ground, they push you mentally, physically, and psychologically, and see who cracks is essentially the piece of it, is the unknown distance rucks, the thinking that you're being watched constantly. I mean, we had a girl who at one point thought that there was cameras in the trees, she was freaking out. I loved it though. I thought that was why you're in the military, to push yourself to like these extremes. I'm sure I could, in my moment, in my body at that time, would not say I loved it, but
yeah.
I definitely, in retrospect, I absolutely enjoyed it. Yeah. So it was obstacle courses and a lot of testing your limits as a leader in team dynamics and how you operate, to see under pressure how you'll behave.
Yeah. And this is early on, correct, in the program?
Very much so. We were I was with Rose. Actually, no, I wasn't. That's a lie. We weren't in selection together. So this is CST2. So Ashley, who's passed, one of our CSTs. So CST2, CST1 was voluntold women,
Okay.
which is never the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so CST2, they realized, okay, we need to like actually put a message out, who wants to do this program, and then select them the proper way. Yeah.
Okay. So you get to Afghanistan. Is that your first deployment of any kind?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was maybe a year and a half in to
Okay.
actually serving, you know.
What are your initial thoughts when you get there?
I mean, so many things. It was, I mean, we were thrown into the, you know, I call the women the lion's den. So we were thrown in with the pit bulls. You know, Rangers are a different beast. Mm-hmm. And I was a brand new, bright-eyed second lieutenant, you know, who, one, they don't respect, and two, you know, I was a woman. And they had never had women ever serving alongside them in any capacity. No other attachments that they ever have were women. They weren't even allowed. I always thought this was funny. In my first deployment, I recognized that our combat camera guy, mm-hmm. he was like, you know that women can't be combat camera. They've changed this since this. But women can't be combat camera people? And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, he's like, but you're here. And I'm like, yeah, none of these rules make sense to me either, you know? Right. But yeah, it was I think I'm sugarcoating it a little bit. It was hard. They were not happy with our existence in any way, shape, or form, being in their space. And for good reason. It had never happened before. Right. And we didn't train with them. They were just told while they're in country that another asset is going to be put to them on the ground, and they don't even understand the purpose of the asset yet. Right? So it's the issue of when you're told or forced to do something, I mean, no one's going to jump on that as leaders, right? So it was not only us convincing them and showing them that we could keep up, but it was convincing them to even take us out on targets and take us, and that we would be value added to the mission.
Yeah. So they didn't like you before you even get there.
100%.
Yeah.
We were not welcome. But I understood that.
Yeah.
I understood that, and I also, for me, I've always taken the approach of I wasn't trying to be them. I hadn't gone through Ranger School yet. I wasn't allowed. Women were still not allowed to do that. I hadn't gone through selection of any kind. I hadn't gone through RASP. I didn't know what it was like to be a Ranger, and I wasn't calling myself one because I hadn't done that. We had a different selection, a different train up, all of those things. And I think that approach to engaging with them allowed me to have a different relationship. I was a sponge when I walked into the room. I was like, how can you help me? How can I help you? And how can we teach each other something? And how can I learn from you? Because I haven't done this before. And I mean, I'm sure I would say different then, but it didn't take much time, I don't think. I did a few missions, and they were like, oh, okay, she's going to be helpful for us on the ground. And then it became like some of the best brothers I have to this day, and the best relationships that, you know, I've carried with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Are you with another female as well, CST, or is it just you, an interpreter?
Yeah, so that was the difference between the two sets of CST routes that you could go. So there was one that worked with the SF guys, which was more village stability operations, and then there was the Ranger Regiment side or the direct action side. And there were some direct action women who did go out as a team. Mm-hmm. Most of us did not. Most of us went out, just us, with the platoon and an interpreter. Hopefully, we had an interpreter. And if we did not have an interpreter, we ad hoc'd on the ground, you know? But yeah, it was just us singularly, as opposed to the two-team situation on the other side.
What is the mission of these, when the Rangers go out, what is their mission? What are they trying to do? Is it intel stuff? Are they looking to arrest somebody or kill somebody or what?
Yeah, it depends. Those units are after high-value targets. The Ranger Regiment goes out at night. We are not there to assist in any kind, in any way, in any manner. I'm trying to say this as politely as possible. Right. We are there to detain or get rid of a high-value target. which leads to very quick action raids on the ground at night, which is why they realized we would be such an asset, and frankly why the direct action side CST program continued for another almost decade. I think the other side, not that it wasn't value added, but it was difficult to show with metrics, which the military does love, how we were value added so quickly. So when we went out as women on the direct action side, they would pull out, let's say, 15 to 20 women and children from a home. Mm-hmm. And within 30 minutes, I was able to gather intel on the ground that directly impacted follow-on targets or our targets that we were after that evening. And it was tangible. And even saved lives from preventing soldiers from going in, or other rangers going into other buildings, knowing that they were booby-trapped or so on and so forth. Yeah.
And you're there to interact with the women and the children, correct?
Yes.
Because of the cultural differences we have.
Yes.
The men can't do that.
Right. Okay. It took a decade for them to recognize that they were losing half the population was not being spoken to or searched. So from an intel perspective, they were missing out on 50% of the intelligence that they could gather on the ground, okay. And that's where we came in. Okay. So it was one, to calm the women and children down, because we were entering their homes in the middle of the night, and as a human to another human, understanding we're at war, but yeah. I mean, that's a lot, right. You know, and the more we could ease the situation, the easier the Rangers' job was to do. Okay. So there was that aspect of it, and then it was also to search the women, where the men had realized over time that, oh, the women don't get searched, so we're going to hide paraphernalia on them. Right. Which is where we came in searching them, and then one by one I would separate the women who were either the elder in the family, or mostly actually the children were tended to be like, oh yeah, my dad's name is blah blah blah.
Right. Children don't tend to lie.
No, they're not lying, right? Yeah. To confirm who we were, looking for, and yeah. So the moment the Rangers realized, oh, we were getting targets so much quicker, because we were being able to pull information so much faster. Okay. Yeah.
And it took the military 10 years to figure this out.
We're slow learners, yeah. One would say.
Yeah. How big of a team are you on when you're going out in the field?
So the Rangers go out in platoon sizes. Okay. So you're talking. It could range. It depended on the lift package we had that night. It depended on the weather, and that's why I say sometimes we had an interpreter and sometimes I didn't. When they realized the value add of CSTs, they wanted CSTs to have an interpreter, so we had our own designated one. Okay. But if the air package didn't allow and we didn't have enough weight to fit on the Chinooks, my terp was the first thing to get cut, which is just the way the world works, right? Yeah. So it ranged from 40 to 60 men. Okay. Yeah. And then me.
It's just one of you.
Just one of us.
Yeah, it seems like that's a monumental task when you get on the ground. It's just you, when half the population is female.
This is true. Yes, it was. And I think that I worked with other Tier 1 units after this first deployment, mm-hmm. doing the same job, and they would always get mad at me when I said the Rangers were my favorite to work with. And the reason was because they realized so quickly how much we had to offer. Okay. They had no ego in it. And the young Rangers, especially those young privates who also were equally treated poorly, because it's the Ranger Regiment, yeah. They were like, oh, how can I help CST? And so I had all of these young, eager men who were willing to help me search, which they couldn't really do, but they would pull security for me. They made me, I was their little sister and their big sister at the same time, and we became a team where they'd be like, hey, I got you, or I'll get an interpreter, or you gathered stuff, cool, and they would help me. They were just like a little, if they had nothing to do, they were assisting me in some capacity. Right. It was amazing.
Right. What are living conditions for you like?
Not bad. I can't complain. Yeah. I'm sure. I say that genuinely because I was not on the village stability operations side, and some of those SF teams and women were going out in the most austere locations with not a shower for months on end. the special operations community is spoiled. I've always said that. The boys are spoiled. So, you know, we had our own little case band. I lived in a plywood box like everyone else did.
Right.
But I got to come home to a shower every night, you know. It didn't matter if the mission lasted 24 hours or it lasted just 8 hours. You know, I got to come home to a nice gym, some food, and a shower,
Right.
which wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I will say, as I went on to continue with deployments in different capacities, the gender thing always played a role, and it was frustrating. So, for example, when I was with, can I say other, I mean, it's all,
Yeah.
okay. So when I was at Delta on my second deployment, very different experience, different mission set, so to speak. They were even more spoiled. I mean, these guys had ordered, we were there during the winter, and they ordered heated vests to go under their kit. They could temperature control it, you know? I was like, do I get one of those? And they're like, nah, sorry. But they had this nice hard-standing building in Afghanistan with Wi-Fi and TVs and all of this stuff. And I was sleeping in a tent in the middle of the winter outside because I was a woman. There's plenty of room in their building, but I could not be in that building. I could come hang out and watch movies, but I couldn't sleep inside their building. So literally I'd be catching water and rain with water bottles in my tent outside while they're in a building.
Is that because you're not you're not Delta, or because you're female, or?
The female rule was the biggest issue. And I understand leaders are trying to do the best they can to not have issues, let's say. Fraternization. Yeah. And that's but if people are going to do that, people are going to do that. Right. Doesn't matter where you're sleeping. Yeah. So that was their reasoning. Yeah. You know.
So you were an officer.
Mm-hmm.
They're also enlisted, did the same job, correct?
Correct.
CSTs that were enlisted. What's the difference as far as your mission? Where is there a difference?
Nothing.
You're doing the same thing.
Same thing. Which was another joy for me, if I'm honest. I should have been enlisted. I respected enlisted soldiers more than I respected officers, and I was one. Right. I liked the hands-on aspect of being an enlisted soldier, and the leadership and the respect that your soldiers gave you. You don't get that as an officer, especially in the special operations community. So I was overjoyed with the fact that we had the same job. And I'm sure when women were in teams and there was an officer and enlisted, I'm sure there was a different dynamic, but I never had that because it was just me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, did the same job.
So you're attached with Rangers and Delta, and also SEALs went out and did that.
Mm-hmm.
CST's attached to SEAL teams and also Green Berets, correct?
Correct.
Is there a difference in the mission between those units, or is it pretty much the same?
Yes, there is. I mean, for the SF teams, obviously their mission set was completely different, or it was supposed to be. I know that they definitely morphed and changed as the war morphed and changed, but the purpose for them was more, how can we assist during the day in building up the rapport within this village, whereas ours was very much direct action. So there's no rapport building, there's no assistance, we're getting information and we're leaving and you'll never see us again. Which does something to a person over time. Right. You know? And that was the same with Delta, same operation. Okay. And Navy SEALs, same operation. We actually have some women here that will be here this weekend who not only attached Navy SEALs, but also were in the Navy. There was a Navy subset to this program for the CST program, so I'd be happy to, it's off topic, but they worked primarily with SEALs and trained in a different pipeline with the SEALs. Yeah.
Talk about the Afghan people that you were dealing with. Were they receptive to the Americans being there?
These are
do
hard.
they understand why you were there? I mean, I'm sure when somebody's in your house that you didn't invite, there's a little bit of standoffish, but do they kind of understand what you're there for? And
No.
No.
You're not throwing easy questions at me, sir. It depended. But we were at war, and you don't realize how quickly your mentality changes as a young person. My initial hope when I was going to Afghanistan was to save the women and children. When you're 22, you're so optimistic to what you can do and what you can change. Not realizing there was a bit of a white savior complex there in that one, but also that's not what we were doing. I have a journal from my first deployment, and I've gone back to look at it, and I've recognized how quickly I went from I'm here to help to I have disconnected the fact that I had to disconnect the fact that they were not people to me anymore. This was a job, and I had to do that in order to survive because of what we were doing. And that's a bit of a tangent, but the receptiveness wasn't great. They hated me as much as I hated them, if that's the answer. And for good fucking reason. Excuse my language, but for good reason. We were walking into their houses in the middle of the night, zip tying their hands and telling them to do stuff, not telling them to do stuff. We were asking them information, and that they well knew that they were just trying to protect themselves, their family, and their country. That's war. And it's not pretty. It's ugly. So.
Did they know, this is a generalized question, but for the most part, did they know why the Americans were there? I mean, I don't think people understand the world over there. Their entire world is that village.
Yeah.
Did they know what was going on outside? Did they know why we're here? Did they know about 9/11?
I think that's another hard piece of this, right, is that we were trying to, which is why the war turned out the way that it did. We were trying to put a Americanized, developed lens on a country that, one, isn't there, and two, doesn't want that, and maybe some do. In some places, like Kabul and bigger cities, there was more advancements that were occurring, but in some of those villages that we were going to, sometimes they thought we were Russians. Because they thought it was the Cold War. Or it's just the disconnect was they did, so no, they did not know. It depended, but most of the time it was like, how can and I think this is like the basic innate human survival happening, which is now as I'm older I've been able to recognize and feel like, I don't want to use the word shame and guilt, but like the reckoning that you have to have when you separate yourself from these wars is the basic innate piece of survival is like, who's going to leave me? How can I get these people to leave me alone? So it was either we were knocking on their doors or kicking their doors in, or it was going to be somebody else, or it was the Taliban, right? Or it was Al-Qaeda, or it was the Haqqani network. Name the terrorist group, right? We were no different to them than that. It was all of the same. It's how can I get my family to survive in this situation? And I've flipped that lens on a lot of friends in America of like, if someone came into your house in the middle of the night, zip-tied your dad's hands, put a bag over it, or a black bag over his head, and started asking your mom questions, don't you think you'd have the same innate response of, I had a 5-year-old boy look at me once and say, I can't wait to grow up and kill people like you. And I looked at him and I was like, I get that. Because that's what we created,
I've heard it said that if we flipped the switch here and it was them coming here, we respond the exact same way that they did. They're just people living over there just like we are.
They're just trying to survive. And my views of all of it has changed, so.
How many deployments do you have?
6.
6 deployments, all to Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Well, so the first one is in 2000. When's the first one? 2012, you said?
beginning of 2012, and then 2013 to 2014, and then basically all of my 20s. So 2015, 2016. I was put in charge of the CST program in 2013. And was running the program at JSOC with a Sergeant Major, Brad Stevens, who's retired now. And that's when Jennifer died, Jennifer Marino, who was our second CST to die or be killed in combat with the Ranger Regiment. And as I took over the program, lots of things changed. The selections changed. The way we paired the women with the men before they went downrange, so they knew the people they were actually deploying. Right. We made a lot of things better over time, right?
Based on your experiences.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. We changed the length of the deployments from, they were sending us for 9 months to 10 months to 12 months. And I remember my first deployment, I worked with 175, 275, 375, all three. And when I was getting on the plane to leave, 175 was coming back in to rip with 375. And they were like, "Oh, you're back? You're going to be with us again?" And I was like, "No, I never left." And they were like, "What?" The reason the Special Operations community has a 4-month deployment time frame is because we're doing really intense things every single day. So there was a lot that I had to change because I was so, and so many others that were in the beginning were so detrimentally impacted by, you can't do that for 9 months and not come back a little twitchy, So a lot shifted. We changed it into 4-month deployments. We tried to fix the cycles so that we were all on the same page and all of that. Yeah.
What changes between your first and last employment?
So much.
Yeah. Just to highlight.
Yeah, so much.
Better, worse? It sounds like the improvements you made are better, but
oh yeah,
on the ground in Afghanistan.
The CST program was much better. Yeah, that was great. The men knew why we were there.
Right. You're now accepted, I'm assuming.
To the best of one's ability, right? It was much better. I think for me what changed and the reason I left and the reason I handed the program off and the reason I got out of the military was the last deployment I had, I landed, went to the compound, and there was another Ranger had just been killed who was 19 or 20. And I'm standing there in formation and I was just like, I'm done. What are we doing? And I knew the answer to that question in my first deployment. Yeah. Immediately. I was like, this isn't right. There's no actual mission. We didn't have an actual strategy any of those years. All of that has come out since. The Afghanistan paper outlines all of that. There was no strategy. And myself personally, I was standing there in formation, saluting this and listening to another platoon leader say another story about another boy. And I'm going to say boy, not man, child being killed for no reason. And I was like, I can't be a part of this anymore. So I left.
How do you look back on your experiences over there? How do you think that has affected your life, or will affect your life as you move forward?
Perspective. And respect for people that, I don't know how to say this. Respect isn't the right word. Love for as many people as I can.
Yeah. Let's fast forward 100 years. We're doing these interviews because we want to preserve stories like yours.
Yeah.
Someone might watch this in 100 years. Maybe they're related to you, maybe they're not. What message do you want to send to them? What advice would you give them? Sorry for for a hard question.
It's okay. Man. History repeats itself. Yeah. Pay attention. you know?
Yeah.
If it feels wrong, it probably is. And I think I'm proud to have served. I think we all are. But I think all of us also knew, just like in Vietnam,
Yeah.
what we were doing was wrong. And I think the difference, the quintessential difference between our generation and the Vietnam generation, is that they came back. Not only that they were not an all-volunteer force, so there was a big piece of that pie, right? But they stood up against it while it was happening.
Yeah.
And we didn't. And I've told friends that recently is, I feel a little bit of shame. We knew, and we kept doing it. And now all of these people are on their pedestals post-war after this horrendous pullout happened, saying, "Oh, we could have done better," trying to blame generals. I'm like, we were all a part of that.
Yeah.
And we could have done something. So I'd say history repeats itself.
Yeah.
Pay attention, you know? Do better. Do better than what we've done. Because we just wasted 20 years and we hurt not only the people of Afghanistan and Iraq, but we hurt generations of Americans, their families, the lives of people's psyches, their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge piece of this.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we didn't do good, because we did. Because look at the FTP program, is amazing. You know, we showed women in Afghanistan that you can have strength, and there's nothing wrong with that power and strength, and you should be proud of it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of destruction that we did too.
Well, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, I thank you for sitting down and talking to us.
Thank you.
And this is cliche, I get it, but we do appreciate your service, because it does matter, regardless of what the politicians did. It's hard to separate, I think, those two, from the individual soldier that went there and did a job, and then the politicians that, again, like you said, history is repeating itself again. They get involved in this, and it just...
Yeah, it is hard to separate.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that.
There is a distinction between the two.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,